Well, hi everybody. I'm Karen Leland. I'm president of Sterling Marketing Group, and I'm a branding and a marketing strategist. And I really work with three different types of people. I work with very high-end entrepreneurs who are solo practitioners but who have very successful businesses. So a lot of coaches and consultants who are looking to position themselves for thought leadership. And then I work with executives and leaders in Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 companies who are really looking to build their brand for themselves, both their personal brand within their company and also to build their personal brand, in terms of their reputation management in their industry. And then I also work with small businesses and entrepreneurial small businesses that are really looking at how they're going to integrate their marketing using online, offline, all the tools that we have today. So those are the three kinds of groups that I work with. And I do a lot of work in a model I created called the Modern Marketing Pyramid. Because what I've discovered is that in today's world, you have to have an integration between all these different kinds of marketing in order to really be successful. So what happens is that a lot of businesses, including small businesses and entrepreneurs, they'll focus just on online, or they'll think about what's the offline part of their marketing, or they'll think about building a platform, or they'll think about becoming thought leaders. And really my experience is that you have to build today your marketing like a pyramid. And so what I'm going to talk about in today's presentation is a model I created called the Modern Marketing Pyramid, which is really a systems approach to implementing marketing. And the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the significant changes that we've had in marketing over the last few years. And one of them is what I call the lucky few versus the persistent many. So in the old days, if you had a business and you were lucky enough to have somebody pay attention to you, so you were lucky enough to have the New York Times find out about you, or you were lucky enough to be on Oprah, right? Remember those days? Or you were lucky enough to get written up in the Wall Street Journal, it meant a lot for your business because you got selected out from the herd. You got pulled out from the herd. But today, even though those things can still make a difference, it's really more about persistence. It's less about a few lucky people getting the spotlight than it is being persistent, online, offline, in your messaging, in your marketing. And those people that are persistent often then get to go viral, or they get known, and they get pulled out of the herd because of their persistence. So one of the big differences today is that if you're persistent, you can get known and seen rather than just being lucky and being picked up by some bigger media source. The other big significant change in marketing is small and targeted versus the big stick. And it's a little similar to the first one, which is everybody used to go for the big stick of marketing, right? Again, whether that was getting written up in the Wall Street Journal, or getting on the Today Show, or getting a big client who you could then use as leverage. Today, it's really more about small and targeted. So it's more about thinking, who's really my market? How do I niche my market down so that I know exactly who my market is? How do I target them? The places where they live, the places where they're online, the places where they work, the places where they hang out. How do I target them? And so that I get my audience, because those are the people I'm looking for. So rather than this broad, big stick approach, it's how do I get small and targeted? That's another big change we've seen in marketing, especially because of the internet. The third one is the haystack versus the needle. So it used to be that if you were an entrepreneur or a small business, you were like a needle in a haystack and people had to try and find you. The great thing about online is that a whole bunch of people can find you, and you can actually be part of the haystack today and still have a great business. You don't have to be that one needle that gets found. You can actually be just part of the conversation, part of the dialogue in your industry, and enough people can find you if you're doing the right things the right way that you can have a very successful business. And then the last one is that marketing has become really more of a marathon than a sprint. So it used to be that, for example, in book publishing, I've written and had 8 books traditionally published by publishers. It used to be in the old days when I started writing books, you had a 2-month window to promote your book. So your book came out and you had 2 months, and after that 2 months it was sort of considered over and done. No more time to promote your book, it was finished. Today, you can have a book that you wrote 5 years ago and you can do a whole new marketing campaign on it that's completely fresh based on what's happening today. So marketing's become more of a marathon and less of a sprint today. And the thing about these 4 significant shifts in marketing is what they've done is they're really shaping the conversation about how we market today. And they shape the conversation whether you're a Fortune 500 company, and they shape the conversation if you're a small business, and they shape the conversation if you're an entrepreneur. Because a lot of our marketing has to be built around understanding these changes. So, the modern marketing pyramid. Let me tell you how I came to this. I started out my professional life as a management consultant, and I did very traditional management consulting for 20 years, Fortune 500 companies, lots of cultural change, lots of service implementation, lots of customer engagement work and employee engagement work. And I started doing a lot more work with marketing departments, and I got really fascinated by the marketing aspect of things. So more and more I started moving my career into branding and marketing. And when I decided to stop being a management consultant and start being a branding and a marketing strategist, one of the things that I noticed was that everybody I was talking to, the businesses I would talk to, they kept seeing everything as separate. So they would hire somebody to do their social media. They'd hire somebody to do their branding. They'd hire somebody to work on their platform development. They'd hire somebody, or they'd have a separate division for their advertising. And because I came from a systems approach in management consulting, that didn't make sense to me. I thought we really have to look at this stuff as a system, like a system. And so I created this structure called the Modern Marketing Pyramid, which is a way to really think about marketing as a system. Again, whether you're a one-person entrepreneurial shop, a small business, or a larger company. And I'm going to go through all the different phases, but essentially there's 3 phases to this. And the first phase is platform development. Second phase is brand and buzz building, and the third phase is thought or industry leadership. Now, I can tell you, everyone who calls me on the phone, almost everyone says they want to be thought leaders, right? Except for the problem with that is if you want to be a thought leader, you have to first start by having some thoughts. So, you know, it's not just that you say you're a thought leader. You have to actually think outside the box or create something new outside the box if you're going to be a thought or an industry leader. And so, really, you get to thought leadership, but it's a result of these other things. And what I often find is that a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of small businesses in the implementation phase sort of are ignoring these 2 and trying to go right to the 3rd level. And so what I want to do today is just take you through what some of the core activities are in these 3 different levels and a sequencing of them in business that makes a lot of sense if you want to get to thought or industry leadership. Okay, so phase 1 is what I call platform development, and that's where you're really setting the foundation for your business. Again, whether it's an entrepreneurial business or whether it's a small business or it's a growing business. One of the most important things to have in phase 1 for platform development is a modern, up-to-date website. Now, I know that sounds like obvious, right? But I can tell you that 9 out of 10 people who call me for me to work with them, first thing I'll do is go and I'll look at their website, and they have an inadequate website. And what I mean by an inadequate website is their website in color and design isn't modern. The navigation is difficult. They don't have an easy-to-read layout. They may not have calls to action on their website. They may not have list-building activities. They may not have done search engine optimization. They often don't have clear branding or messaging. They often don't have professional writing. So how many of you just know friends, and you can just raise your hands, who have businesses, whether they're entrepreneurs or small businesses, and you look at their website and you think, wow, this so doesn't fit the quality of what this person is doing or what they're offering? How many of you have friends or people that you know like that? Yeah, so almost all the hands are up. So this is a very common problem in phase 1, is that people don't really have a modern, up-to-date website. And remember, today, when you talk to somebody, a potential customer, one of the first things they're going to do is they're going to go to your website and they're going to check it out. So the quality of your website is really, really critical. Part of the problem is people say, well, I hired my cousin to do it because he understands computers and he was cheap. And I said, okay, that's great, except for that's the result of the website you now have is that. And so one of the most important things, even if you are just starting a business, is to make sure that your website is the best you can have it be, the most modern, up-to-date that you can have it be. That's part of the platform. The second thing is a clearly articulated brand and message. And I'm always surprised at how well people do at articulating their brand and their message. So most people, they look at their brand as 4 things: the look of the brand, the logo of the brand, the label that the brand has, like, you know, what it's called, and then the line, what you say about your brand, like the one-liner. And all of this is part of the brand, but I think brand goes even further. I think it's really that you have to take those 4 things and you have to combine them with what I call brand sound bites. And brand sound bites are a way to talk about your business that has impact with other people. So for example, a unique branding proposition. You know, what is it about your brand that's different than somebody else's? Not necessarily better. So it's not putting down the competition, but what is it about your brand that's unique? So for example, I had one client I was working with. She was and this was her personal brand, but the same idea applies. She was a director of finance in her business in a high-tech company, a high-tech startup, but they were actually pretty far along. They were really doing extremely well. And I was interviewing her about her business and her life and what she had done, and she said to me, well, I used to be a chiropractor. And I said, well, that's really interesting that you went from chiropractor to like director of finance. I said, do you ever tell people that? She said, oh, no, no, no. I think it would make me look really bad if I told people that. And I say, why? Why would it make you look bad? And she says, well, because, chiropractors, has nothing to do with finance. And I said, well, what did you do as a chiropractor? And basically what she said was, well, I would diagnose people's bodies and what was working and what wasn't working, and then I'd put a plan in place to fix it. I said, okay, what do you do as a financial manager? Well, I diagnose the financial health of our business, and I put a plan in place to fix what's not working and keep it going. I said, you do the same thing. You're fixing a system. It's just one was the system of the body, and the other is the system, right, of the financial health. And so when she saw that, she realized that part of her unique branding proposition was that she's always been someone who knows how to look at a system and assess it and fix it, whether it was the body or the health of the finance of the organization. So thinking about your unique branding proposition as a business and integrating that into your messaging is really critical. Also, what's your authentic story or your narrative? Why are you doing what you're doing? How did you get to the place that you're at? What made you want to start that business? That's often really important to people. I had one guy that has a very successful career placement company that I was working with, and we were talking about this idea of the authentic story, and he said, it's funny, I was trained as a jazz musician. He said, and it's not what I ever did for a living, but I have training as a jazz musician. And he said, I realized that part of why I like what I do is it's kind of like jazz. I'm putting different people together and we're doing different things. And he realized that that actually was part of his authentic story and his narrative, and he started to integrate it into his brand, into his platform. Then the third thing you need is signature services. What is it that you're offering? What are the products or the services that you're offering that are your signature? So for example, for me, the Modern Marketing Pyramid is one of my signature services. Is it better than what anybody else has? Probably, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Is it different than what other people have? Yes, because it's what I've invented. So it's having a signature service or a signature product is one of the ways that you start to distinguish and brand yourself. And then the fourth one, and I think this one is really critical, is brand, tone, and energy. What's the energy? What's the tone that you bring to the work that you do? What's the tone or the energy that you bring to your business? And often people don't think this through. And it's really critical because if you're somebody who's like, I have one client, first of all, he's a big guy, physically big. Big guy, in your face, strong personality, very senior executive coach, works with lots and lots of senior executives coaching them. So the kind of guy this guy is, his brand, tone, and energy is very in-your-face, straightforward, direct. So when we designed his website and we wrote his website and we did his branding, his stuff is fast, it's in your face, it moves, it's intense because that's how he is, right? I have another client does the same kind of work, very gentle, very quiet, very laid back. Her brand tone, her energy is totally different. So for her, we had to design a whole different narrative and a whole different kind of website that was way softer because that's more her brand tone and her energy. And I find that people often don't think a lot about this. They don't think about what their brand tone and their energy is, so they don't integrate it into their platform or their website or their messaging. And then they feel like, that website or our brand doesn't really fit us. It doesn't really fit. We don't really have what we need. Often people will call me and they'll say, we just spent $30,000 doing a branding project and it doesn't feel right. And it's because they didn't think about these four things. What they thought about was the look, the logo, the line, but they didn't think about the proposition, the narrative, the signature services, and the tone and the energy. So really the way that you get a clearly articulated brand and message is by combining those things. The other thing in phase one that you have to have is consistent social media. So, the look and the logo of your social media has to be consistent. Your profile pictures have to be consistent. I'm really surprised sometimes I see different profile pictures on different media and they're totally dispersed. The message has to be similar. The keywords have to be similar. The tone, the about section, the links back to the website, all of this needs to be consistent between your different social media. Because if you look like one business on LinkedIn, or you look like one person on LinkedIn and you look like another business on Pinterest, or you look like a third business on Twitter, it's confusing to your audience. It confuses your brand. And so this consistency in social media is really critical. And the thing is, whenever I do this presentation, even as I say these things, I think to myself, God, these sound so obvious. And they are, except for I will tell you, doing this professionally, every day people call me to work with them, from single businesses that are doing $100,000 a year to businesses that are doing $100 million a year. And I find these problems consistently with everybody across the board, regardless of the size of business. And so really, it's this platform, and developing this platform is critical, because that's the foundation on which you're really building your brand and your marketing. And if that's in place, then when people come to you, then when people see you, you're giving a consistent message. Otherwise, you can drive tons of traffic to your website. You can drive tons of people to look at you, but the message they're getting isn't really closing them. You know, they're not really moving them forward because it's an inconsistent or not an incomplete message. Here's the biggest mistake people make in phase one. It's the failure to hire the right help or any help at all. So what happens is, it's always a matter of time, money, and quality. You know, what's your strength? You might have more money than you have time. You might have more time than you have money, but you might not have the ability or the quality to do these things. So again, often people will say, well, we needed a website, but we didn't want to spend the money, so we hired my cousin Fred, you know, and he came and did it because he's an engineering student. And then you look at the website and it looks like Fred, the engineering student, did it, right? It doesn't look like a professional website. So the thing is that the biggest mistake is people don't hire people, or they don't hire the right people. And so it's really important in this phase to assess your strengths. What are you good at? What are you not good at? And what you're not good at, you want to hire out. You want to get somebody else to do, whether you have to do it for trade or stock or an intern, however you do it. You don't want to do the things you're not really good at, because they won't be done well. And that's the biggest mistake that I find that people make in phase one. All right, phase two is brand and buzz building. And the thing about phase two is this is where you're going out and you're getting your message out. You know, you've got your platform in place now, so now you're really ready to get your message out in terms of the implementation, to get your message out about your business, what you're doing, what you're offering, who you are. Here's the problem. There are over 40 different core strategies you could use for brand and buzz building. And most people can't do all of these. You know, if you're Coca-Cola and you have unlimited resources and unlimited time and unlimited money and unlimited staff virtually, yes, of course you could do all these. But if you're most entrepreneurs or small businesses, you can't. You really have to make a decision. And in my experience, most small businesses, most entrepreneurs can't handle more than 3 to 5 of these. 3 to 5 of these strategies will keep you very, very busy and very, very occupied. And I think 5's a lot, by the way. I think 3 is about what most entrepreneurs and small businesses can handle. And which one of these you choose has a lot to do with your market and where your market is, and where your market hangs out, and where you think you can do a good job. So for example, I know some people where they're building a lot of their strategy on radio shows, because their market listens to radio, and so they just do radio campaigns all the time. They are always on the radio promoting their business, and they get a lot of inquiries from doing radio. I know other people where radio would be useless to them because their clients, their potential clients, don't listen to radio, or they don't listen to those shows. So really it's a matter of thinking it backwards from where does your client live and what are you good at, and then finding those strategies. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of them. One of the things I always look at is what's the return versus the investment you're going to get on that particular strategy, and then do you love it or do you loathe it? So even if you get a huge return on public speaking, if you hate public speaking, if you detest public speaking, if you'd rather die than get up and stand in front of a room full of people and speak, probably not a good strategy for you as an entrepreneur, right? Because you hate it so much you won't do it, or you won't do it with any joy or love or any quality. You can hire somebody to do it for your company potentially, but you wouldn't be the one to do it. So here's one of the things I think about is you've got to think about where's your market. So for example, you know, if you look at Facebook, the 10 biggest industries on Facebook based on the number of fans: sports, fashion, retail food, fast-moving consumer goods, entertainment, media, electronics, auto, retail, beauty. So this is a good business to consumer marketplace. So if you have a product or a service that goes to consumers, business to consumer, and you're in one of these 10 areas, Facebook's probably a great place for you to advertise, to be, to participate, because you know your market's there, and you know that your market is involved in these areas. It's mostly 18 to 29-year-olds, although that's changing, and they're finding more 30 to 49-year-olds are getting on Facebook. So it's really more driven by the industries. I have a friend, her market is in fast-moving consumer goods. She started doing ads on Facebook. just as a test to see what happened. And she's getting very, very good response. Why? It's that same thing, because she's going small and targeted. She's finding the people who are the right people, and she's targeting them. She's not spending time on some other social media because Facebook has the right demographic for her. Think about LinkedIn. So 79% of LinkedIn users are 35 years or older. But the thing about LinkedIn is it's generally a more educated, higher earning crowd. So LinkedIn is a much better business-to-business marketplace rather than a business-to-consumer marketplace. So if your product or service is business-to-business, LinkedIn is a great place to put your efforts. Some of the most popular things on LinkedIn are IT services, financial services, computer software, telecommunications. So again, if you're in any of those areas, LinkedIn is a good place for you to be. So does everybody get where I'm going with this? It's really a matter of assessing what these social media markets are and determining, because you're not going to do all of them. You might be on all of them, but to take the time and the effort and the money to work all of them, most of us can't do that, so we have to really strategically pick. Twitter's an interesting one. It's mostly males ages 18 through 29. The thing about Twitter is it requires a stream of content, 2 to 3 tweets a day. And the thing is, if you have a business that's very heavy in how-to information or content or strategies or expertise, Twitter can be a good place for you to be because you've got that content to just keep putting out there. If you're not a content-rich or a content-heavy business, Twitter's a lot harder for you because you got to work a lot harder to come up with what those things are. So Twitter's ideal for experts and businesses with expertise that can be broken down into 140 character bits of information and put out there. That's a great strategy for people with those kinds of businesses. And then the last one I wanted to talk about is Pinterest. My most recent book was Entrepreneur Magazine's Ultimate Guide to Pinterest for Business. So I learned more about Pinterest in researching it and writing that book than I ever thought I would know. But the thing about Pinterest is it's a very interesting social media because right now it's 72% women and their ages 25 to 54. So if your demographic is women ages 25 to 54, Pinterest is probably a great place for you to be. Some of the most popular topics on Pinterest: home, arts and crafts, food, women's fashion, inspiration, how-to. So Pinterest is great for highly targeted products, books and services that lend themselves to visuals, because Pinterest is all, pictures, and so it has to lend itself to visuals. So if you fit within that, Pinterest is a great place for you to put your efforts. And the point of all of this is that it isn't about just being everywhere all the time. It's about really strategically picking the places where you're going to be, because those places are where your audience is and they fit your business. They fit what you're offering. Here's the biggest mistake I find that people make in phase 2, and it's the failure to measure the long-term impact of their strategies. Let's have a sip of water here. So this is actually something that happened to me. I was writing for the Huffington Post. I still do occasionally, but I was writing a regular weekly blog for the Huffington Post in the business section, in the small business section. And I wrote a blog post. I can't even remember what it was on. Now, as you guys know, the Huffington Post is famous for not paying most of their writers. You do it for the exposure. So even though I'm a professional writer, I get paid to write magazines and newspaper articles and books. I decided for my own marketing, one of my strategies was writing. I was going to write for free for the Huffington Post. So I wrote a blog post, a business blog post. I actually don't even remember what it was on. A reader read that blog post and sent me an email and said, "Karen, I found your blog post very interesting. I think you should connect up with this person." And she gave me this woman named Susan who she thought I should connect up with. So I went and I looked Susan up online, and Susan did in fact look interesting. And so I sent Susan an email. And I said, "Susan, hi, my name's Karen Leland, and I write for the Huffington Post, and I also write for Entrepreneur Magazine, Entrepreneur.com. And one of my readers read a blog post and suggested we talk, and so I'm not a crazy person. Here's my website. You can go look me up to see I'm legit. Please contact me if you're interested in talking." Okay, so Susan goes, looks on my website, sees I'm not a crazy person, and she calls me on the phone. And we have this fabulous conversation chatting on the phone about work and what we do, and we're kind of in similar businesses, but we could support each other. And in the middle of the conversation, as it turns out, we discover we live in the same town. We both happen to live in the same town. So I was living in San Rafael at the time. And so we go, well, let's meet for lunch. So we make a date, we meet for lunch, and we not only have a great time talking business, but we really like each other. And we really like each other. And we're like, oh, this person could be a friend, somebody I could be friends with. So we really like each other. We meet for lunch. And I think one of the things I loved about Susan was that she really ate. So it wasn't like she was like, oh, I'll just have the salad. I mean, we were at a Thai restaurant, and she was like, oh, let's have this, let's have that, let's do this. And then at the end, she's like, let's have dessert. And I was like, I like this woman. She knows how to eat. So about, I guess, a month after, maybe 3 weeks after our lunch, we stayed in touch. I get an email from Susan saying, I've got a client I'd like to refer to you. She referred the client to me, and the client closed. And it was a small client. It was about $3,500 worth of business, right? Okay, that client had a vendor that they were working with. And the vendor happened to mention to them that they needed some branding and marketing work. So this client that Susan referred me to their vendor. Their vendor became a client, and that was a $30,000 piece of business. So one little tiny free blog post that I wrote that took an hour to write ended up in at least $30,000 worth of business, right? $33,000 worth of business. Except I could actually take this box and extend it out because that was a couple of years ago. This box is probably now a $150,000 box. So one of the things that I think happens is we get so into measuring, you know, well, if we tweet this, what's the return here? If we do this blog post, what's the return here? And of course we should measure that stuff, but the problem is there's a long-term impact of this stuff that's hard to measure immediately, but you can measure in the long term. And so the biggest mistake people make is they get too focused on just the immediate that happens rather than seeing it in the long term. Okay, phase 3. So now let's say you've built your platform, right? Your platform's straight, it's in good shape, you've done your brand and your buzz building, it's consistent, you've gotten word out there. Phase 3 is thought leadership. And thought leaders generally do 3 things. 1, they form new thoughts. So they're not just rehashing the same old stuff. Same with industry leaders. They're really doing things that are new. So they're doing research, and they're telling people what the latest research is. They're conducting surveys and polls. They're countering common thinking or wisdom. They're generally adding something new to the dialogue of the conversation in their industry. That's what thought leaders do. The other thing they do is they speak for their industry. So I know for some of you who don't like public speaking, that's probably bad news. And I can tell you that given where the world is going, getting comfortable with public speaking is going to be there's 2 skills you are going to need to develop in the world to be a successful entrepreneur. In the world we're in the world that we're going into. One is to become at least a decent speaker, if not a great one. A decent one will work, and a decent writer. Those are 2 things. Those are 2 skills everyone is going to need to have: decent writer and a decent speaker. So usually they speak for their industries. They speak at conferences. They're interviewed by reporters as experts in their area. They're on radio or TV. They're a go-to source for media. You know, they are seen as being someone who represents their industry or their business. I do a lot of work with CEOs on CEO branding to help CEOs position themselves in this way because it creates a double brand. They have the brand of their business, but then they have their brand. And so every time they show up, it enhances the brand of their business. Steve Jobs was a great example of that. You know, he never showed up to speak where you didn't think about Apple. So he created a great personal brand that also enhanced his company brand. And so it was a dual brand. And the third thing they do is they generate content. Some kind of content. So thought leaders write books, they write blogs, they write articles, they do podcasts, they do webcasts, they do video. They're content producers. Now, they may not do all of these. They might just write books, or they might just write blog posts, or they might just do video casting, or they might just do podcasting. But thought leaders generate content. There's somebody that you can count on to get regular, consistent content about their industry or their area. The biggest mistake people make in phase 3 of thought leadership is they put it out there before their platform is in place. Remember what I said about your website and all of your platform being your brand being clear, your website, your social media being consistent? The biggest mistake people make is they start going out and talking about who they are and what they do and this and that, and they drive a ton of people to their website or a ton of people to their social media, but guess what? When people get there, it doesn't fit what they've heard or seen, and so they leave, or it doesn't close them. Or it doesn't forward them in working with the person because there's an inconsistency. And so this jumping of the gun to get out there and be a thought leader before your solid platform is in place is the biggest mistake that I see people making in phase 3. So I'm going to go back. Let's see. So again, when you talk about modern marketing, there are three things you have to focus on. And I think you have to focus on them in this sequence. You have to focus on developing your platform, because that's really where your brand gets designed. It gets designed in your website, it gets designed in your social media, it gets designed in how you talk about your brand, right? Then the next part is really your brand expansion, and that's the brand and the buzz building. And that's when you're going out there and you're saying, which of these strategies am I going to use to really get people to know about who we are and what we're doing, or who I am and what I'm doing? And really strategically picking those. Not trying to do everything everywhere, be everything to all people, but strategically picking. And then the third one is thought leadership, which is where you're really rising above to be the person that represents your industry or your business, because you're being interviewed, you're speaking, you're generating a lot of content. All right, I'm going to go through back to the last slide, because what happens often in these things is people will ask questions and then they'll think of a question a week later. So if you think of a question a week later, there is my information. You can simply email me at KarenLeland.com, or you can go to my website at KarenLeland.com, or you can do kl@KarenLeland.com, or you can call me. So that way, if you have a question that comes up afterwards, please feel free to do that. So I'm going to end the formal part of the presentation, and thank you so much for your attention and your time. And I'm just going to open it up for questions at this point.